Hello, everybody, and welcome to Nessie's Dead. We are your hosts, Spencer and Helen.
Hello.
Hello. So, what kind of episode do you think I have for us tonight?
I don't know, maybe something. Well, you did true crime like the last couple of times. So I feel like it's got to be like a conspiracy or a haunting or just something weird.
It is very weird.
Okay.
It's something that I don't think a lot of people know, and I feel like it's something that could have been more common knowledge. I don't know any like kind of little hints to say without giving things away, but even if I gave you like a lot of info with it, I don't think you would guess what we're going to talk about. But with that, I will tell you, we are going to be talking about A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Like the movie?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. It's funny because you and I, literally just the other day, you and I were talking about how we're not great big Nightmare on Elm Street fans.
No, it's not my favorite.
No, and like it's fine.
Yeah, there's like it's okay. Like it's the first one's fun, but it's not the franchise that I gravitate towards.
No, it's not my franchise at all. It's no Scream. It is. I mean, I enjoy it. I have only a disclaimer. I have only seen the first one and the Freddy vs. Jason one, so I can't speak too much on it. And I have been trying to get more into it. I was just watching the first one actually the other night, not because of this episode. It just kind of all naturally happened. I guess I'm just gravitating towards Nightmare on Elm Street right now.
Well, maybe you will start liking it more.
Maybe I need to see the second one.
I've seen them all. I do like the first one. Freddy vs. Jason is a lot of fun, but it's still...
It is.
I don't know. Freddy Krueger is just not one of the icons that is like one of my favorites.
No, but he is like this massive favorite for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And like I can understand to an extent.
People love him.
He also, I know a lot of people find Nightmare on Elm Street to be the scariest concept of the like classic horror, which I understand. It does not strike me personally.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
It's more fun to me.
Yeah.
Like I think the idea of like Michael Myers is creepier, honestly. But let's go ahead and get into it a little bit. So A Nightmare on Elm Street was released November 1984. And it was directed and written by Wes Craven, who also did Scream. So it's a slasher film about an evil spirit, Freddy Krueger, and he kills teenagers in their dreams. And when you die in the dream, you die in real life.
Yep.
This film was a huge success and has gone on to be considered one of the best horror franchises of all time. It has had a huge impact culturally. And it's gone on to have, I think, a total of 10 movies within the franchise. And it also has a spinoff with Friday the 13th. There was a TV series about it. I just learned about that, actually.
Yeah.
Video games. And Freddy himself is very...
iconic.
Yeah. Growing up, going to any, like, you know those kind of novelty miscellaneous media stores in the 2000s. Like nowadays it would be called a record shop typically, but you'd go and you could get movies or CDs and like bobbleheads of characters or books and action figures and posters, kind of like a Spencer's Gift or kind of like what Hot Topic has become today, because that was not Hot Topic in the 2000s at all.
They used to have it. It used to be called Hastings was one of them.
Yes. Those kind, like Freddy, there was always a cutout of Freddy. Always. At least 2 Freddy cutouts and a handful of Freddy dolls. Yeah. And he was kind of the main, I feel like Freddy and Ghostface have always kind of been the main ones. So it's very culturally significant. It was also very pivotal for the slasher genre in the 80s. The film has been quite a big deal since being released in 1984. But what about before it was released? Where did this idea of Freddy Krueger come from? Well, Freddy Krueger himself was predominantly inspired by Wes Craven's own childhood fears, which I found very fascinating. For instance, Freddy's brimmed hat that he wears, the same type of hat was worn by Wes Craven's neighbor growing up, and he was afraid of this particular neighbor.
Oh, that's interesting.
Also, Freddy was the name of Wes Craven's childhood bully, and he chose the knife hands.
Yeah.
Partially because he wanted the weapon to be a knife, but he didn't want it to just be a knife the way that Michael Myers and Jason were using it.
Yeah.
He wanted to kind of like amp it up. So when he was a little kid, he was afraid of his cat's claws, and that's how the idea of the knife hands came to be, which I think that is so cool.
Yeah, it's genius.
Also, I don't know if this is actually true, and I don't know if Wes Craven himself ever said this, but the colors red and green on his sweater, apparently those are the two hardest colors for the mind to process.
Did not know that.
Fact check me, I don't know, but I heard that like several years ago, and I was like, oh wow, cool, and it's always just kind of stuck with me, and I just choose to continue to believe it.
Good.
So that's what created Freddy Krueger for the most part. But what about the story itself? The story of a terrible sleep demon murdering you in your sleep. Well, that was allegedly a very real phenomenon in the late 70s, early 80s for a certain demographic of people. So, with that, let's take the plunge into the terrifying story of the Dab Tsog and its reign of terror on the Hmong people.
Okay, I don't know this. I thought we were going to talk about Nightmare on Elm Street all night.
No,
it's not. Okay, very.
Isn't it funny that
yes,
you and I always talk about how we need to do an episode where we do like a deep dive on the Scream franchise.
Yeah.
And you and I love Scream, and we're not huge Nightmare on Elm Street fans, and you're probably sitting there thinking,
what world?
Why on earth are we doing Nightmare on Elm Street?
I was.
So, who are the Hmong people? And when I'm referring to the Hmong people, it is spelled Hmong, not to be confused with Mongolian. But the Hmong people are an indigenous group from East and Southeast Asia. With this whole story, there are a lot of different details that kind of seem like they don't all correlate, but I promise it does all correlate, obviously. It's really interesting how something very foreign to Wes Craven's world from across the seas could inspire him in the way that it did to create Nightmare on Elm Street. In the late 50s, the Vietnam War began. It took place for a total of 19 years, from 1955 to 1975. And geographically, it took place between Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos.
Okay.
And the Hmong people of Laos were involved with a, quote, secret war fighting with the U.S. against communist forces. But when the communist forces won, the Hmong people were, sadly, very heavily persecuted. That's always a terrible thing when that happens. And we're seeing it happen still to this day. So the Hmong people were being terribly persecuted, and they fled. They were seeking refuge in really places all over the world, but they predominantly went to Thailand and the U.S. They left in the late 70s. They left their kind of rural lives up in the mountains and came to all these different cities all over the world. But specifically when in the U.S., they mostly came to California, Minnesota, and Michigan. Now, with them, they of course brought elements of their culture, things like dishes and clothes and whatnot, but they also brought beliefs and superstitions with them. They are a clan-oriented shamanic people with a strong belief in animism and spirits. One spirit in particular we're going to be talking about, and that is a nightmare demon known as the Dab Tsog. Dab meaning spirit, and So being the name of the entity, kind of like, it's like a title. Dab acts as like a title, sort of.
I haven't heard of this.
I'm surprised more people, especially like horror fans, I'm surprised more people don't know about it, because this is the real life inspiration to the Nightmare on Elm Street movie.
Maybe more people that are like really obsessed with that movie itself.
Maybe.
But as for me, I'm like, I don't know.
Well, you're about to know. So in Hmong culture, the Dab Tsog would suffocate you in your sleep and take your soul. It is believed to be a shapeshifter, always appearing differently to different victims. However, the one through line is that it always comes as a female. I find that very interesting that it always appears female. It'll come in different forms and styles and whatnot, but always as a female. And it's interesting because with like sleep paralysis, people typically see the same thing.
Yeah.
It's very regional. Like I did some research into how people all over the world having sleep paralysis, it's like people in this culture, you know, their sleep paralysis is a white hag, and in this culture it's the hat man, and in this culture it's this kind of man. And it's just really interesting how everyone sees the same thing culturally.
Culturally. I've never seen really anything other than like shadows out of the corner of my eyes. It's mostly a lot of noises and stuff behind me.
You?
Yeah.
I've never had it. Lucky me.
Yeah. Maybe I can pass it on to you somehow.
I think the shadow beings in sleep paralysis, I think that's common in America.
They're always like right out of the corner of your eye. It's like you can't make out, but you know, like.
Well, the Hat Man is considered a shadow being as well. Have you seen the Hat Man?
Yeah, but that was like in real life and just like laying there and just like a shadow of a guy in a hat just walked by.
Oh.
And I was like, whoa.
Freddy Krueger?
Maybe.
But yeah, if anyone has a very specific sleep paralysis demon that they see, please weigh in the comments and let us know what you see. I'm very curious.
Me too. I'd love to see if anybody else has something different or strange.
Yeah. Does anyone see the Dab Tsog or Freddy Krueger in their sleep paralysis, perhaps?
I'd hope not.
Well, the Dab Tsog was apparently very commonly visiting the Hmong people. So after fleeing Laos, many of the Hmong men were suddenly dying in their sleep. And this was during the late 70s and into the early 80s. So first, let's talk about the main case that I learned about with all of this. There was a man named Mr. Pang. He was 35 years old. He was a Hmong refugee, and he had settled in Oakland, California. He had no known medical issues, totally healthy. He suddenly died in the middle of the night, in the middle of a nightmare. His wife explained to the authorities that she was awoken by her husband flailing around in a panic. She tried to wake him up, assuming that it was nothing more than a nightmare, but he did not wake up. No matter what she did to wake him up, he just continued to sleep and panic through this nightmare.
Oh, that's terrifying.
He was convulsing and moving his arms around as if he was fighting something off. Then he also had like crazy breathing, and then all of a sudden he just stopped, let out one last groan, and he was dead right there. His wife, of course, calls 911, and he was pronounced dead instantly. This, of course, is very strange, but the thing that makes it extra strange was that it was not isolated. Mr. Pang was the 18th man to die this way in his sleep for seemingly no reason in 1981.
18?
Yeah. Wow. Oh, the number gets bigger from there.
Oh.
All these men died the same way, flailing their arms around, convulsing, making distressed groans, distressed breathing, choking, in an obvious panic. And if their spouse was there, their spouse would attempt to wake them up, but no matter what they did, would not help to wake them. They would just continue through the nightmare.
And die?
Yeah, well, there were some men that were being visited by the Dab Tsog that did not end up dying. Oh. But when it came to the waking up, flailing around, and choking, that they died, yes. Many of them would actually have, like I just mentioned, would see the Dab Tsog and not be claimed by alleged spirit. But a lot of these men that were seeing her or him, the entity regularly, were taking those like wake up alert drugs. I don't know what that's called. like truck drivers take them.
Uh-huh.
So they were taking those drugs and like heavy loads of caffeine to keep themselves up because they were afraid to fall asleep.
That's an awful feeling, not to be able to fall asleep.
Yeah. Now, this was only occurring to younger men with no underlying health concerns. They were between the ages of 33 and 35 years old, and they all died within 17 months of arriving to the U.S.
Whoa, that's really fast.
And really specific.
Uh-huh.
Now, there was one woman who was reported to have died this way, and she was also among refugee, but otherwise they were all men, and they were all that age. There was a total, actually, in the U.S. alone, of about 100 Hmong men dying in this manner. And that was just late 70s, early 80s, and over 230 cases of this in Singapore and Thailand.
Oh my God, that's wild.
Very wild. Very scary.
Yeah.
And you can't help but be like...
such a high number. How did we not know about this more?
I know, when I learned about this like a few months ago, I was like, how on earth are we not talking about that? Especially considering the fact it inspired Nightmare on Elm Street.
I mean, I thought you were going to stick around the 20s or 30s, but that's a ridiculous amount of people.
I know. Now, each of these cases would be reported by the media as like a one-off instance. However, by 1981, people did start to connect the dots and see the pattern. The Hmong people knew all too well that this appeared to be the work of the Dab Tsog. And according to legend, the Dab Tsog would come to those who did not pay respect to their homelands and or to their ancestors.
Oh, do you think it's because they all fled?
That is what a lot of people believed, a lot of Hmong people. But at the same time, it's like, how do you not flee? You know, you're being persecuted. They were losing rights and their lives, and
maybe you're just supposed to stay and take care of your homeland regardless, like go down with the ship.
That's what the Dab Tsog apparently thought. But traditionally they also left offerings to the Dab Tsog, and I don't think those offerings continued on once they made it to like city life in other countries.
Oh, that too. Yeah,
so they believed that the Dab Tsog was angry about not being left things. I also saw something about sacrifices being made to it. I don't know what that entails. I don't know what was sacrificed or how long ago that was, but there's that as well. Either way, the Dab Tsog, if real, was not happy at all. Obviously, authorities did not believe in a supernatural being haunting and killing anyone, but specifically a whole demographic in their dreams.
Yeah, that doesn't sound very plausible for law enforcement to be like, oh, the Dab Tsog.
Yeah. So when this was happening and there was no explanation for the cause of death, the only thing that they had to go on really was the fact that these Hmong men, all of a sudden their heart goes out. They go out in a panic in the middle of their sleep, and that they were 30-something-year-old Hmong refugee men and one woman. So initially, it was being referred to as Asian death syndrome because that was kind of the only correlation they could figure out.
Yeah, but it wasn't happening to all the people of Asian descent.
No, no, not at all. But the official word on this phenomenon is now referred to as SUNDS, SUNDS, which means sudden unexplained nocturnal death syndrome. And this is the official cause of all of these deaths. It is also believed to have been connected to SADS, or sudden arrhythmic death syndrome, but SUNDS, sudden unexplained nocturnal death syndrome, is kind of the main bulk of it. That condition first appeared in the CDC in 1977 because of these cases. Like, this syndrome only exists because of this whole experience.
Dang.
Like I said, there was no obvious cause of death, and that's kind of what led them to just be like, well, it's like a sudden, unexplained death, and I guess it's a syndrome. But it's still very odd how this syndrome was only going after this one demographic in a very specific time frame. Even though there was no apparent cause of death necessarily, other than this newly coined condition, they did find something very odd in some of the bodies. Some experts in Chicago were studying them, and 17 out of 18 that they did this research on had frayed, twisted sinoatrial nodes. I think I pronounced that correct. But that's something with the heart. It's carrying electrical impulses from the brain to the heart. And I'm not a cardiologist. I'm not a biologist. So all of that goes like way over my head.
Same.
But that's kind of the best way that I can describe it. So it's carrying these electrical currents, and it was frayed. They compared it to that of a burnt out electrical fuse. So it seemed that there was a sudden electrical discharge that was shocking these men's nervous system, causing the heart to stop. Essentially, they were being scared to death.
Yeah, which just seems very rare because, I mean, we've all had some pretty scary dreams that have woken us up where we're really shooketh.
Yeah. And, I mean, there are cases of people being literally scared to death, but not quite like this. Now, before finding out about those burnt, frayed electrical fibers in the heart and whatnot, Wes Craven read a news article, or a collection of news articles in 1981 detailing the strange, unexplained nightmare death that was happening to the Hmong men. And he stated, quote, "It was a series of articles in the LA Times, 3 small articles about men from Southeast Asia who were from immigrant families and who had died in the middle of nightmares. Like we mentioned before, this of course gave way to the creation of A Nightmare on Elm Street." But what really caused this? Obviously there's that main theory, the official cause of death, sudden unexplained nocturnal death syndrome, and connecting to sudden arrhythmic death syndrome. With sudden arrhythmic death syndrome, there is a type of that called Brugada syndrome, and it's a genetic disorder, and it causes the heart to have abnormal electrical activity, and it can lead to sudden arrhythmic death syndrome. One of the main theories is that because Brugada syndrome is genetic, that perhaps that was the correlation and why it was happening to only the Hmong men and the one Hmong woman. But that still doesn't answer why it was happening in this time frame and why they were all 30-something years old and why it was only happening to the refugees.
Yeah, none of it really. You would think it would be happening if it was genetic. Maybe some children would have had it, some more women perhaps, rather than just one, because it shows it can happen to women if it happened to the one woman. And you would think it would happen in much older men, not in their...
Exactly. Or someone with an underlying health concern.
Yeah.
It just, that, I don't know. That's what the official reports say, though.
It's like the math isn't mathing.
Yeah. Another theory was that it was epigenetic mutations triggered by extreme stress, which makes sense to an extent. Yeah. Because obviously these people went through horrendous stress going through the Vietnam War for basically 20 years and then being persecuted in their own homes and then having to flee and find safety in a whole new world, essentially, and just kind of start from scratch. I mean, whenever you're escaping something in your country, it's not like, oh, just gonna hop on over somewhere else. There's turmoil there. There's obviously going to be a lot of stress.
Yeah.
But again, it doesn't make sense as to why it was just the men and the time frames and the ages and everything. So that doesn't really add up for me.
No, everybody would have been going through the same amount of stress, it would seem like. Thrown into a new environment, having to leave their country. I would feel like especially children and elderly people again. So that there in the prime is like very odd. Again. Another
theory was that it was from chemical warfare.
Okay.
Now, there was chemical warfare being used during the Vietnam War, and the chemicals could easily cause neurological damage. But again, we have the men in their 30s and the time frame, and only the refugees for the most part. It just keeps on not adding up.
Did you find that they had a lot of this going on those who stayed behind as well?
No. Unless it wasn't being reported. I mean, they were up in more isolated mountainous regions, but I feel like there would be some word on it.
Yeah.
You know?
Especially with the numbers we got here.
Well, especially with it being a sleep demon that they're well aware of.
Oh, yeah.
And so I guess that leads us to the final theory. Was it really the Dab Tsog?
I mean, I think so. And I do think it has to do a lot with the offerings and just leaving their homeland like that. They were told not to. Like, that was kind of against everything.
Yeah, but, like, how do you not leave?
I mean, I don't think demons really care.
Yeah.
I don't think the demon is worried about your well-being, and they're going to kill you anyways if you go against what they want.
The demon could just make up the rule so that it could do it, theoretically.
Maybe it goes back further than that. Maybe the Hmong people had promised the demon it would do this and keep something in order to gain something in the long run. And maybe the demon did fulfill its side at one point, and so they were forever supposed to keep up with their promise.
It's happening more than we realize, and maybe the government is well aware of it, or the governments are well aware of it, and they keep it covered up for whatever reason. Kind of like how the CIA has documents on successful astral projection, and that's not conspiracy mumbo jumbo. That, like, look that up. That is actual declassified information.
Yeah.
The CIA didn't just work with psychics. They like actually did real work with mystical stuff that actually like worked. So maybe there's something to that. And like maybe some of the deaths that occur in other parts of the world get covered up. And maybe this was just like one big cluster of it. And remember, it was all being reported on as if it was one instance. And then people started to kind of piece it all together. So maybe when you talk about it all in one big chunk, the government's like, oh, no. I don't know. My mind just went all over with that little theory, but...
Yeah, this is a crazy instance. And it hasn't gone, like, big chunks of numbers ever since?
No, there's nothing else ever since the, like, early 80s.
Huh.
Maybe the demon did really want the offering. And maybe the demon considers a Nightmare on Elm Street franchise as the offering that keeps it alive.
Oh, perhaps. That's a good theory right there.
It could, like, channel itself through it, in theory.
Perhaps. Since it was based off of it.
Isn't it crazy to think that the idea of... First of all, it's crazy to know that A Nightmare on Elm Street is theoretically based on true events.
Yeah, all those people actually did die.
It's crazy to think, like, watching Nightmare on Elm Street, you would never think it had anything to do with the Vietnam War.
No.
Or real life lore or anything like that.
No.
And it's just kind of crazy to see where it's gone from here.
It is. It's really bizarre. I feel like a lot of people think it's more of, Freddy wasn't a very good guy in the movie. The backstory and stuff, I think a lot of people view it more that way than some sleep demon who actually does come and kills people in their sleep that's based off of some ancient lore from another country, for sure.
Well, it's kind of like with Scream. The first one was inspired by the very real case of the Gainesville Ripper with very real murders that occurred in Florida, but the rest of the movies are not based on that.
Yeah, but I feel like that's a little bit more side by side than this, for sure.
Well, yeah.
If the Nightmare on Elm Street would have had where it came after the parents rather than the children as the curse, like the teens, that would have made more sense.
Now we have to watch it.
I know. Now that I know this lore here and this backstory, maybe things will make a lot more sense. Maybe it'll be like, oh, this and that, and oh my gosh, yes.
Well, I saw someone explaining it how the movie is kind of like, to an extent, liberation and anti-establishment, connecting it back to the Hmong people being persecuted in their own homeland. Because in the movie, the teens are not believed, and that one guy is being wrongfully accused of the one girl's murder. I felt like that was kind of a stretch. I think that Wes Craven chose it to be teenagers because that was what was popular for a slasher film at the time.
Yes, definitely.
I don't personally think that he was intentionally correlating like anti-establishment ideas with it.
I don't think so either. I think people like to really elaborate and find more than there is in horror movies.
I mean, it makes sense, but that to me was a bit of a stretch.
Yeah.
Comparing it to, with teenagers in high school versus...
Sometimes I think it's just fun and people really try to like make it into a lot more than it is.
Yeah. It's interesting also because you and I talk about so many paranormal cases on this show where we're like, hey, this reminds me of this movie. I wonder if the director was inspired by this. Like when I covered Sam the Sandown Clown.
Yeah, we keep going back to Stephen King on it's two different episodes.
Now it's Wes Craven.
Yeah.
So we've done 2 Wes Craven movies now.
We have.
And Nightmare on Elm Street for inspiration. So I got to keep this going.
I think we do. Maybe we should put them all in a chunk together. Maybe we could do like what's it called that you like to do, where you do a bunch
compilation.
Yes, maybe we can do one of those.
That's my favorite.
I know it is.
I'm due for another one. This is 2 episodes in a row where I didn't do that.
I know. I was kind of thinking this one was going to be one.
Surprise.
Nope.
This was nothing close to what you were expecting, was it?
No, not at all.
There was a lot more I could have gone into that does go way over my head. And I didn't want to get a bunch of details wrong because I'm not very well versed in the Vietnam War or the persecution of the Hmong people. But I did obviously need to touch on it. And of course, it is important to talk about. Mm-hmm. But that is all I have on the Dab Tsog and its connection to A Nightmare on Elm Street.
I'm definitely going to have to watch the movie again now and kind of see. I can't believe a whole culture of people, though, went through those.
I know.
Deaths like that. And yeah, I feel like that's like the number one thing you would know about that movie or like be told.
Well, you'd think it would be in the opening title based on true events.
Oh, they missed out on that.
Horror movies love
that.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Oh my God, he was real. No, it was like very loosely based on real life events.
Yeah, it was that one serial killer.
It was like kind of a hodgepodge of ideas, like Ed Gein, and there was a killer who was in Texas, but he wasn't. I don't think he wasn't cannibalistic. He wasn't wearing human flesh. He wasn't wielding a chainsaw. They took a lot of liberties to create that film.
Yeah,
and say it was based on real events, and a lot of people still to this day think that scary cannibal family really existed in Texas.
They do, which is funny. Well,
you can go to the butcher shop. It's a restaurant, I think.
The gas station. Yeah, me too.
I've been to the town that it was filmed in.
Oh, really?
I got stuck there during a storm, actually.
Oh, that makes it even better.
I know, it was terrifying. And there was a car. I was in the middle of nowhere, and I pulled up to this I don't know where I was, but some kind of building with I think a bowling alley, and I was by myself, and it was like tsunami storm. Not that a tsunami is a storm, but it was the water was coming down like a tsunami would. I remember I was alone in this parking lot, and a car just parked right by me, facing me. So I moved. I was like, I'm leaving. I don't care.
Yeah, no.
All I could think was Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
We've done enough true crime and stuff to know that's terrifying when somebody parks right next to you and there's no need for it. Well done. I loved it. Now everybody has to go rewatch the movies since they have this information in their back pocket now.
Yeah. And now it's a little creepier when we say good night.
And pleasant nightmares.
Bye.
Bye.